Welcome to Dr. Joe Unplugged. The topics discussed in this podcast will reflect my opinions and are not in any way to be regarded as medical advice. 2,000 calories a week. What? The average person needs somewhere between 1,400 and 2,000 calories or so per day to keep themselves going. That's why to lose weight, you need to get below that. And obviously people are different. Bigger people use up more calories and energy each day in just being alive than smaller people. It's not right or wrong or good or bad. It's just like bigger cars use more petrol than smaller cars. These are facts. Facts aren't very popular these days, but nevertheless. Now, that figure of 2,000 I heard many years ago at a conference. It was by some guys from the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. And it was on their website. It's many years ago. I'm going to try and find the link, but apologies in advance. It probably won't appear in the description. But that was the reduction in the number of calories per week used up between 1965 and 2010. And that's around about 1 day's worth of food or calorie intake. Now, how did this happen? Just for those of you old enough to remember, and obviously some of you won't be, once upon a time you had to get out of your chair to change the TV channel. Once upon a time when you got home in the evening, you had to get out of your car to open the garage door. Once upon a time, you typically had to hang clothes out on a washing line rather than put them in the dryer, and you often had to put clothes through the wringer. You had to do the vacuuming yourself. And I appreciate a lot of people probably still do that. There's a lot of incidental movement and activity that we got each day just in being alive that we don't get anymore. And that figure is quite amazing. So what it says is that if you were eating exactly the same amount of calories in 2010 as you were in 1965, then it's like you haven't used up 1 day's worth. So you don't have to have done anything different, and you'll find that you'll be putting on some weight because of this loss of incidental movement and activity. And this is separate to exercise. Exercise formally when you go to the gym or you go for a run or get on your bike, that's formal exercise. We're talking about, just getting your steps or your movement just in a day-to-day setting. And it's actually quite a lot. Now, look, it's good if you get home at night and it's raining, and you can push a button and it opens your garage door, look, it's good. That makes my life certainly, and I'm sure your life easier. That's a good thing. And yes, if you're sitting down and you got your remote control and you don't have to get up to change the channel, look, I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. But it's also, now there's hundreds of channels. Back in those days, there were, 3 or 4 or 5. But it all adds up. And it all adds up to the fact that we're getting less movement. So gardening is classed as moderate physical activity, meaning that it has the benefits of moderate exercise, helping not only with weight, but also mental well-being. So this is an article on Healthline, and we'll put that in the description. So gardening, you might think, well, that's a chore, and a lot of people see it as a chore. But it isn't, for a number of reasons, and that includes that it is some movement. You're probably going to have to walk around the garden. You might be digging. You might be pulling out some weeds. You might be planting a new plant. There is physical activity. You might get the broom out and sweep some of the leaves away, and then you've got to put them into a receptacle and then put them into your green bin. So it is a form of exercise. You might not think of it as that because you're not in the gym, but it is. Now, we also know that time in nature is good for mental health. And you might say, well, look, a garden is not like going out into the forest or into a park. It's a park in miniature. If you've got a bit of lawn and you've got some plants there and you spend some time there, whether it's your backyard or your front yard, then that is still getting some, you are spending some time in nature. You're outdoors. There's a couple of other things that you get when you're outdoors. One of them is fresh air. We spend a lot of time in air conditioning these days. And yes, it's still air. It's still got oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon dioxide and all those other components. But it is recycled. So we get fresh air when we're outside. And we also get some vitamin D. We get a bit of sunshine. Now, it's probably not a good idea to spend 3 hours in the garden when it's 40 degrees outside in the middle of summer, because you might get sunburned. That's not a good thing. But we know that a lot of people are deficient in vitamin D. And we also know that you can get free vitamin D from the sun because the ultraviolet light, the ultraviolet rays, help the body convert inactive to active vitamin D in the skin. And you can spend 15, 20 minutes or so doing a bit of gardening a few times a week if you wanted to, and that would get you a reasonable amount of vitamin D. Interesting here, there's also gardening has been a way to resist injustice and claim a space in the world that doesn't always respond to your need, which is an interesting concept. It sort of basically says that people feel like they're they're doing something, which they are. I planted that. Oh, look. I planted a lemon tree, and a little while later you might get some lemons. You can get a sense of achievement around that. Place looked a bit messy. I've tidied it up. It hasn't changed the whole world, but it does give a sense of achievement. And it also, you've shown that you can affect some change. Maybe it's small. Again, it hasn't changed the world. But, for a lot of people, that is very, very beneficial. And again, we know that a little bit of physical activity, and we know that spending time in nature is good for mental health. So again, it's not a formal treatment for anxiety or depression, but it has shown to help both of those for the reasons that are well established. And as I suppose a subset of that, working in a garden may help improve markers of stress, such as increased heart rate and blood pressure. And again, it's not a treatment for those conditions, but you're chilling out a little bit. And when you're in the garden, you hopefully, assuming, not on your screens. You've gotten off TikTok. You've gotten off emails. You've just gotten outside and, got your hands a little bit dirty. And grounding can be very, very good as well. Like literally getting your hands dirty. And it can be something people can do together. And again, aside from doing it at home, here students who participated in school gardens took photos of their work and shared what they experienced. They reported that skills they learned and relationships they formed provided a sense of personal well-being. Again, people are different. It's not going to be for absolutely everybody. And don't buy plants that you're allergic to. But I think what this really tells us is that there are simple aspects of life that we can do and that we can control, and that these are useful for our health. Now, we don't need to see it through the prism of disease and disease treatment. No. Not everything needs to be seen through that lens. Not everything needs to be medicalized and reduced to that level. How about just it's something that's going to be good for us and we will feel good about it at a very, very minimum. We're going to feel quite good about getting out in the garden and making it look a little bit nicer, or planting something that will grow and maybe provide some herbs one day, some coriander or basil or whatever you like. And instead of going to the shops, you can go out into your backyard, or even if you're in an apartment, you can have them on your ledge or on your balcony and, bring them inside and put them in your cooking. And again, when people grow any of their own produce, it also encourages to do some cooking, which in turn means we're less likely perhaps to buy as much processed and packaged food. And I want to emphasize again, none of this is absolute. It's not one or the other, but we can move the dial in a direction. And other things can be useful as well. You've got a swimming pool, maintaining that. Look, again, I don't think people are typically that fussed on vacuuming, but again, it's a little bit of exercise versus maybe getting the automatic device doing it. And look, I appreciate people might not have the time either, but again, time that you might spend pushing a broom or a vacuum cleaner around, maybe reframing that as, well, this is getting me some steps and a little bit of activity rather than, why do I have to do it? But I do accept it's not everybody's, if you like, cup of tea. But gardening can be. And worst case scenario, you can just sit in your backyard or on the balcony or, wherever it might be, and spend a little bit of time in nature. So the exercise or movement would be a good addition to that. But even as we know, just getting out into a little bit of nature, and it can be a little bit of nature, as a number of health benefits, and then the movement component goes on top of that. So a lot in health is made very complicated. It doesn't need to be. And this is probably a pretty good example of just getting out into your garden from time to time. Maybe try and do it, once a week. But again, whatever works for you is a good thing for you to be doing. Thanks for listening to Dr. Joe Unplugged. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, share, and consider subscribing. Tell your friends. If there are topics you'd like to see covered, be in touch through the chat or email info@drjoe.net.au. We'll be uploading new content each Monday, and soon we'll be putting these videos out on X. You can follow me there at Dr. Joe's DIY Health.